Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Taylor Combaluzier, a mining analyst at Red Cloud Securities, Inc. Today, focuses on World Copper Limited, which is currently focused on the exploration and development of its two copper porphyry projects, Cristal and Escalones in Chile. Today, I have with me on the webinar Hank Van Alphen, the President and CEO at World Copper. The format of the webinar will be one, Hank will provide the update on World Copper, including an overview of the company's projects and what investors have to look forward to in the near term. And second, we'll take questions live. So please send us your questions via the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. You can type in your questions at any time into the chat box. So to start, we'll handle disclosures and get into it. So for World Copper, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this call. I would direct listeners to the cautionary note on page 2 of the World Copper corporate presentation located on the company's website. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. And we note that this call does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investment. So now I'll turn it over to Hank to update you on World Copper and what investors have to look forward to with this company.
Thank you very much, and everybody, welcome to this webinar. It's kind of an interesting world that we live in, so seem to be doing these kind of things on a regular basis, but it's actually working quite well. You know, no traveling. Save enormous amounts of money on the airline fees, at least. Anyway, World Copper is a copper company focused in Chile. Chile being obviously one of the best places for copper exploration and copper mining, one of the top producers in the world. So obvious place to go, not just for Chile, but for the people that are around this deal. So this is where we start. Cautionary statements. I won't read all this kind of stuff. We'll spend a bit too much time on that. So World Copper, as I said, you know, Chile being the place to be. So one of the reasons why we are in Chile is the management team here. The first person you see here is Marcelo Awad. He was the ex-CEO of Antofagasta Minerals. While he was CEO, he managed to get the company from a few $1 billion to about $20 billion. So he's one of the top copper CEOs in Chile. So therefore, he's one of the main guys that is involved with us. And luckily, we have him on our deal. I don't want to spend too much time on copper. I think everybody on this webinar is convinced that copper is going to set new highs in the near future. It was fairly obvious. I've been involved with Marcelo, that is, in a lithium company. And obviously, when you look at lithium, you start to realize as to what the future of copper holds. Lithium is also turning around. This has to do with the electrification of the world. So I think copper is going to be one of the places where you want to be in the commodity sector. As I said, let's not spend too much time on copper. There's one slide I'd like to show, which is this one, which says actually, and this is, I read this several times now, that the demand for copper is going to be somewhere like 80 million tons a year by about 2050, which is about 3.3 times the current demand. And I don't really know from where I sit as to where that supply is going to come from. So one of the things that's going to happen is that the price of copper is going to go way higher than where it is today. So this is one of the driving ideas. I've always been very interested in looking at copper projects. Good copper projects are very hard to find. And I think this is where you want to be in the commodity space. Sorry about that. I should see electric cars are going to use 3 times as much copper as normal cars. There's all kinds of reasons why we want to be in the copper space. Here you see Chile, one of the major producers of copper in the world. So here's the sort of the management team. Top left is Mr. Marcelo Awad. Main reason why we're here. He, as I said, he's the He was the #1 CEO in South America by Forbes. Lots and lots of experience in the copper business. Patrick Burns, president, Canadian geologist, been there for 40 years in Chile, was one of the guys that was the discovery team of Escondida. Lots of experience in the copper space. John Droop, on the bottom left, he has been with me for quite a long time. We were involved in a company called Corriente Resources, which had a copper discovery in Ecuador, which was sold to a Chinese group for about $860 million. One of the directors, top left, person called Roberto Ferrar, ex-VP of exploration for Codelco. Codelco being the largest copper producer in the world and government-owned corporation in Chile. So there's a team with a lot of depth involved in this company. So there's 2 projects in World Copper. One is in the north, close to the Peruvian border. The main project we have is just southeast of Santiago, called Escalones. Escalones, southeast of Santiago, 35 kilometers east of El Teniente. El Teniente being the largest copper deposit in the world. 35 kilometers is kind of an interesting distance, since that the great David Lowell had this idea that copper centers in Chile should be around 35 to 40 kilometers away. So we are, just by coincidence, 35 kilometers away, so it kind of fits in quite nicely with David Lowell's ideas as to where the porphyries pop up. The land package here on Escalones is a rather large claim block. You could see where the drilling was done on this orange area there in the south center. The 25,000 meters were drilled in 53 holes, and there's about 750 million tons of about 0.4 copper equivalent. And we have a supergene target to the south, which is probably going to be doubling this resource. So it's well over 1 billion tons of whatever grade comes out. But the interesting thing about this resource is that the first 300 meters of Escalones is actually oxide. So we have a very large oxide deposit sitting on top of Escalones, and that's really going to be the initial focus. And we assume that the supergene target to the south there will also have that 300 meters of oxide sitting there, since there was at least 1 hole drilled into it. So we will come up with a rather large oxide resource in Escalones proper. There's 3 other porphyries sitting to the north there. We know we did some Astero studies on them. There's been some sampling done on them. We know that there are porphyry centers there. So there's 3, and each one of those is at least the size of Escalones itself. So we could end up here with multi-billions of tons of porphyry mineralization. So it's one of the unique situations, I think, in Chile here, that we actually managed to get a hold of a cluster of porphyries, and that would be comparing to the big Chilean mines, where it's not just sort of one porphyry system that sits there, but multiple porphyry systems to create these mammoth copper deposits. So we are lucky to actually have gotten control over one of those. This is where the drilling was done. You can see the drills there. It's generally on the flat area. The extension we call Macho Amarilla is that yellow stained rock to the left there. So below that, you go right into a valley where there would be enough for at least 500 million tons of pads to be built if we go into a oxide SXEW operation. I'll show you this. So this is a cross section from the north from north to south. So it looks, see, you can see it quite good. The top 300 meters on this drilling has been, is oxide. You can see what a higher grade sits. It's all at surface. And then Machura Maria is the extension to the right there. And if you go further right, then it drops right off to about 2,000 meters into a valley, which would be a fantastic place for a leach operation. So this is really why we're excited about this project. So Escalones has 4 porphyries that we know of so far, and one of them has an oxide layer and a fairly substantial oxide layer. So this is one of the big porphyry systems that we see in Chile, and we managed to get that on our portfolio. You can see here the Astero, you know, there's copper in the system there. So it's we actually are starting groundwork there right away to come up, because any of these kind of properties here individually can actually be better than Escalones itself. So we do want to go in there right away, start sampling geophysics and drilling them this year, just to make sure that we aren't, you know, missing out on maybe one of the best porphyry systems out there. So we need to do that ASAP. The other project we have is a project called Tristal. It's close to the Peruvian border. It's along the West Fisher Fault. It's basically really a physical target. It has had some work done around it. The focus is really sort of looking like this is the center of that system. We will be putting a few drill holes into that. It's covered, this beige rock that you see there is kind of a post-volcanic cover. So we need to drill through that and then see what this porphyry looks like. I would suspect that we'll probably be lucky enough to hit a porphyry there. It just depends on the grade, since it will be some, you know, a block caving situation in the future. So this is like an easy, you know, this is kind of the future probably of exploration in Chile, where the low-hanging fruit, the stuff that comes to surface is basically been picked over, and you're going to have to start looking at the secondary situations. But this is probably, you know, it's a good target. It's got all the makings. It's in the right place. We're surrounded by every major copper company in the world. So if we get lucky here, we'll have lots of audiences. This is just the geophysics. I don't want to go into that really. Copper is, as I said, we're going into an era where copper is going to be in very short supply and huge demand, and by virtue of that, I think we just want to be in the right place. We may in the future do some more acquisitions, because I think really this is the time to grab whatever copper projects you can get your hands on, at least, you know, obviously reasonably good projects, because this is going to be the place to be in the commodity space. Shares outstanding, they're a little bit more than I would like to have come out with, but we started this company a little bit at the wrong time when COVID-19 hit us. So unfortunately, there weren't that many people interested in copper, funny enough, about 6 or 7 or 8 months ago. So we did our financings a little bit lower than anticipated. But, you know, most of, or at least half of the stock will be escrowed. So the Gold Springs and the Wealth shares we're having a 3-year hold on them. And then will be 2 more years after that it can not be more than 10% of the daily volume. So of the shares outstanding, so pretty much 50% are escrowed. I would say that we're at the end of the presentation here. I don't know, maybe I was actually faster than I thought I was going to be, but anyway, open to questions.
Great. Thanks a lot. So we'll now start the Q&A portion of this webinar. Just a reminder to everybody on the line that you can type your question into the chat box at any time. So to start off with, our first question that's probably on the mind of a lot of investors is, what's the progress with the listing for World Copper right now?
Oh, yeah. We should be listed on the last is from the exchanges that list on the 25th, which is next Monday.
Okay, and getting that out of the way, I guess. A few questions coming in. First one, what impact will the new Chilean constitution have on World Copper and mining and exports in the country?
I don't really, I can't really answer that question in a sense since I don't really know what the new constitution looks like. But if you look in Chile is heavily relying on mining. 65% of the GDP comes from mining. So I don't think they can do funny things. It's always been a very pro-mining country. I don't think they can afford to change that around with doing something funny, because this is where the future lies for Chile as much as any. So I would say it probably isn't going to change the lay of the land. And if we're talking about Chile, I mean, you have to say it's probably one of the better places in South America to invest in. So I don't see that there is going to be that much changes in terms of the mining industry.
Right. So another question coming in, kind of along the lines of the listing, looking towards the future, I guess, is there any plans of listing on the London Stock Exchange in the future?
Well, that was, I should have maybe talked about that a little bit, but Marcelo, being the CEO of Antofagasta, was, Antofagasta Minerals is on the FTSE 100 in London. So he was a very popular guy. So when I used to go with Marcelo to London to promote our other company, everybody was always telling me, why don't you come to London with a copper company, because that would be not a bad place to be there. Marcelo doesn't have a lot of enemies, obviously, in London when you go from multiple billions to $20 billion in market capitalization. So he's a very popular man, and we have all the intentions of actually going to London.
Okay. I guess turning now towards more of upcoming drilling. What is the budget of the drill program at Escalones?
Well, the initial drilling that we're going to do is not that big a program. We're going to start in Macho Amarillo. We're going to drill 6 holes to the south along the ridge there before winter. Hopefully before winter comes. There is a few months there, 3-4 months, let's say, that you can't do any work. So we're in the fall now, let's say, or going into the fall. So we would like to do offensive drilling on the Macho Amarillo extension. Sorry, right here you could see the drill holes outlined on this cross section, just to pick up that oxide more, so we have a good understanding as to what this oxide layer looks like. There has been one hole drilled into it, and it came up with there was a 0.6 copper intersection. So we can actually maybe even hope that our grade will come up. So this would be a very obviously powerful addition to the story here. So that's what we really are aiming for right away.
Okay, and
but it's 6 or 7 holes, and since we know that the oxide cuts off at 300 meters, we don't need to go any deeper than 300 meters in the initial program.
Right, and what was the timing of that program?
Well, we are hoping to do that in the next little bit. So so as soon as we can actually get a drill up there.
Okay. Another question, just wondering about the average grade of nearby porphyry deposits.
Well, El Teniente, I don't know what they are now, but they started at, % plus or whatever. They're probably about below a percent now. So, I remember what is happening in the world, and I'm not so sure if we're going to suffer from this in a sense, because we got 3 porphyries sitting there, and maybe during the exploration we're going to do, we may find more of them. So, what is happening to copper mines in the world is that the grade is going down and down and down, like the good old days of finding multi-billion tons of 2% are kind of a little bit gone. Not to say that that couldn't happen to us here, but it's, but overall porphyry grades are going down. So that also will result in the fact that copper grades or copper prices are going to have to go up. Yeah, you can't have it both ways. And if demand is really picking up, then the price of copper is going to have to accommodate the maybe increasing cost of production. So but we could easily have several porphyries sitting there that could be, relatively high grade. Plus, this thing, as you can see, hasn't really been drilled down to depth that much either. So you never really know. A lot of these porphyry systems, when you keep on drilling, you can actually, hope that your grade is going to increase. So this is like a multiple target. We know there's lots of skarns there, which are generally much higher grade. We have those. There's a lot of skarn opportunity for us to drill on. So this thing is open. It's got multiple opportunities for it to get bigger and to get better.
Right. Perfect. And I guess another question, wondering when will leach results be available, made public, I guess?
Well, that's as soon as we get to drill, everything seems to take a lot more time these days, but, after drill results, you're going to come up with maybe results 4, 5, 6 weeks later. Right.
Okay. And another follow-up question, I guess, with all this, with the drilling, it's, is there an updated 43-101 report available?
There will be new reports coming out. We're doing all the work now on, let's say, what this resource looks like, what the oxide looks like in the resource. So all this stuff will become available. And then, for me, if you look at this deal, like I like to start focusing on oxide initially, because that's the fastest way to move this company forward. You can get a PEA done in the near future, and an oxide is something you don't have to build tailings dams and tailings ponds, so it will be a permitting process that would be a lot faster. So for me, the initial focus is let's get looking at this oxide. We can always drill off these big porphyries, but for a small company, we have an ability to move an oxide project forward with the capex the way it is, and generally low OPEX. Once you get into the big porphyry systems, they take billions of dollars to put into production and years and years. What will happen here is focus on the oxide, get this thing moving forward, get some personnel around that can actually that has experience putting these things in production, and then look on the other side at the big porphyry systems, because in the end we're a junior mining company, so you can always say the end game here is to sell the whole thing. Yeah? But if we can actually start with the oxide, we can start creating value fairly quickly. And if the price of copper comes up here in the next several years, then you can sort of talk about we can be in a production scenario not that far in the future. These big porphyries, they take billions and years to get there. So for us to create value immediately, let's focus on the oxide and then start drilling off the big resources.
Right. And I guess just kind of dialing in on that a bit, do you have any rough estimate of what kind of capex that would take and the time frame to get to production?
If you depends on the size, always. It's but we have, let's say, space for about 500,000 tons below the hill. If you took this slide to go to the right, it drops right off. There's space for about 500 million tons. So your mining operation, you're talking hundreds of millions, like $250, $300 million to get actually to a production level, as opposed to $3 billion for a massive porphyry system. So it's actually we're actually capable of moving forward on with those kind of scenarios as a junior company.
Right. Okay. A couple of questions coming in. Just wondering how much money you have in the bank right now. What's the treasury at?
Well, we just raised 3.2, so we'll be over 3.5 or something. Enough. We have enough money to do the initial program, let's say, and then unfortunately we'll have to get back to the marketplace at some point. But we will be able to do the drilling, and we have a crew going in there to do the sampling. We'll do some geophysics on the outlying things, so we'll be able to do that. But we certainly, unfortunately, will have to get to the market.
Right. Okay. And just with this, do you have any payment commitments, heavy payments?
Say again.
Do you have any heavy payments that you're?
Yeah, we need to make. We have one payment to TMI and a payment to the underlying owners of Escalones this year to make.
Okay. Another question, just maybe you could go over the capital structure again. There's a question, just wondering kind of where the company stands at in terms of warrants outstanding and exercise prices for them.
The warrants outstanding are 5-year warrants, and they are 20 cents, and we're actually planning on, listing our warrants so that people can actually trade warrants as opposed to having this as an overhang. So that's what we're actually trying to aim for here. But they're 20 cents, and they were 5-year warrants. Remember, we financed ourselves in the depth of despair, and probably gave a little bit more than we really normally should have, but that's the way it went. I mean, I wasn't actually planning on having COVID-19 in my operating plans. So, but anyway, we're on the other side now. I think this is a fantastic opportunity going forward.
Yeah, and another question: do you own the water rights project?
No. I mean, water is always an issue in Chile. That's also why I'm actually, aiming for this oxide thing going forward. I mean, there is water. We're in the south of Chile. We're not in the northern regions where you have desert environments. So we do have water in the area. So it's not like we're in the dry part of Chile, but water is a water issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Kind of moving on. Another question: based on the close proximity of Codelco's Teniente mine to the Escalones project, if Escalones grows, are there any potential opportunities with Codelco? If I was a betting man, I would say the opportunities probably lie more with foreign companies than with Codelco, even though we're very close to their operation. It is a government-controlled or owned operation. So, I'm not entirely sure how aggressive Codelco is buying stuff, but it's right next to them. So it would make sense to start thinking about that. There is also another operation at El Teniente, which treats the tailings. Now, that would, if we're talking about oxide, that would probably be a much better fit in the short term, let's say. But, but I would say Chile is always looked at by the big mining corporations in the world as a favorite place to go to. So I would say we'll have lots of interest in coming on into the future. Okay. So I think one of the last questions we have is, there's been a lot of questions about the listing, and I know you're still just about to get your TSXV listing up, but there's one wondering about if you're going to get a USA listing anytime in the future.
Yeah, we have already gone down that path, so we'll try to be listed there as ASAP. So we have people, this is not the first company we're starting, so that we will hopefully be listed there in the next 4, 5, 6 weeks, maybe 6 at the outset, 4 weeks at the fastest. But there will be an aim to get that done. And as I said, we will probably start looking at London, even though I haven't 100% decided. It depends on where this thing goes a little bit, but I'd be kind of keen to go to London, and that partially to do obviously with Marcelo.
All right. Okay. So maybe just before we wrap up, you could wrap it up by giving the potential investors the top 3 reasons why they should invest in World Copper.
I think the main reason, if you look at a copper company these days, here you have a company that has 5 porphyry systems under its control, of which one we know has an oxide layer already. It has resources. It's in Chile, and I think the people around it are actually capable of actually moving things forward and maybe even getting more projects under our belt as well. So I would say that this is like a fairly unique opportunity. And another thing is when the tide comes in, all boats go up. Yeah, meaning the copper tide is coming in. By virtue of that, copper companies will go up.
Right. Perfect. So with that, I think we'll wrap it up. And I'd like to thank Hank from World Copper for taking the time to host this webinar today with Red Cloud Securities. And thank you to everybody on the line for tuning in with us.
Thank you very much. Okay.
And just a reminder that our next webinar will be featuring Klondike Gold tomorrow, January 19th at 2 p.m. So once again, thank you for tuning in.
Okay, thanks.